Hey everyone, this is Than from Tidal Gardens. I recently gave a talk on reef photography, and while the subject is fresh in my mind, I thought I would make a video about it. Our tanks are a challenging thing to shoot, so hopefully this video will be helpful to those that want to take better pictures. Before I launch into some of the tips and tricks, I want to go over some basics. The goal is to capture good exposure. Think of exposure as a function of aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. I'll touch on all three, but my focus will mainly be on aperture. Aperture is basically the size of the hole in the camera that allows in light. The bigger the hole, the more light shines in. Aperture is signified by an f number or f-stop. A smaller f number corresponds to a larger aperture. It's actually an inverse relationship. A good way to visualize the relationship of aperture, shutter speed, and ISO is a bucket filling with water. Let's say to achieve good exposure, you need to fill the bucket with a hose. The aperture is the size of the hose. The bigger the hose, the more water flows and less time it takes for the bucket to fill. That time is the shutter speed. There are benefits to filling the bucket faster to achieve a faster shutter speed. ISO is sensor sensitivity. You can turn it up in digital cameras. In this bucket analogy, it would be kind of like replacing water with spray foam. It would certainly fill a lot faster. Okay, that may not be the best analogy for ISO. Imagine instead a badly tuned radio where you can't quite make out the song. You can turn it louder and louder so you can hear the music, but you would also introduce more static and crackle. That's the trade-off with ISO. You get more signal, but you also get more noise too. If I haven't lost you up to this point, you may wonder why not just get a big hose to shoot spray foam into the bucket and just fill it all up in a nanosecond? Well, the short answer is, all of these things, aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, affect the look of the image in different ways, and all of them have their drawbacks if you take them to an extreme like that. To simplify things, I would recommend just thinking about aperture when starting out. To do this, look to set your camera to aperture priority. By doing this, the camera will automatically adjust for all the other parameters. So you may be wondering what makes aperture so darn special. Basically, it dramatically affects the depth of field, which gives the photographer a great degree of creative control. I'm about to show you 3 images of a brain coral taken at 3 different apertures. The smaller the aperture, remember bigger numbers equals smaller aperture, the more of the coral will appear in focus. This control over the depth of field is vitally important because it allows you to emphasize the subject and de-emphasize the background and foreground to direct the viewer's attention. In this brain coral example, it looks like the best aperture was f16, which got more of the coral in focus. Now, do you remember the problem that may arise from shooting with such small apertures? Think again of that bucket. f16 would be a very small hose, and it would take an extra long time for the bucket to fill. It would take a slow shutter speed, which could introduce motion blur from either the subject or from the movement of the camera itself. So what can we do to preserve f16 and minimize the effect of that slow shutter speed? Well, there's really 3 options at this point. Number 1, you can crank up the ISO. Number 2, you can add more light, like a flash for example. And lastly, the tripod. What's nice about a tripod is that it eliminates handshake from the equation. When shopping for a tripod, there's 3 factors to consider: price, stability, and weight. At best, you can have 2 of the 3. I can tell you right away though, if you want super lightweight and incredible stability, prepare to spend about $1,000. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of background about exposure. Next, I want to tackle a question I get all the time about lenses, namely macro lenses. If you've spent any time at all on reef message boards, you've probably seen great close-up photos and talk of macro photography. So what exactly is a macro lens? Technically, it's a lens that can magnify a subject in a 1-to-1 ratio onto the image sensor. Okay, now in plain English, what that means is that it's a lens that can focus on things really close to it. Most macro lenses are 100mm fixed focal length lenses, but don't even worry about that too much. Take a look at these 2 lenses here. One is a zoom lens that can be set at 100mm, just like the macro, and the other one is our actual macro. So what's the difference between these 2? The big difference is what's known as the minimum focus distance. The macro lens is designed to be able to focus on those subjects right on top of it practically. That zoom lens set to that same 100mm focal length, though, may require a few feet to properly focus. This up-close ability of a macro lens allows extreme magnification, which works great for reef photography. The last point I'll cover in this video is angle of view. The glass acrylic of our tanks is basically another lens. If we shoot at it at an angle, it's going to bend light and create unwanted distortion. So try as much as possible to shoot straight perpendicular to the glass to minimize that distortion. To give an example of what this looks like, here's two shots of a Pavona coral. One shot straight on and one shot at a 30-degree angle. Okay, that does it for part 1 of the reef photography series. I hope you liked it. If you haven't already, follow us on Facebook for some cool updates. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye.